Well, good morning, everybody. Wonderful to be here. I love SENEDIA. I both love, respect, and a little bit fear Molly McGee because she does such a good job. So I'm always glad to be here with you. As usual, I want to say a few words about the looming climate crisis and what it is probably going to look like for the defense industrial base and for those who operate on the oceans. I will flag for you first that on September 5th, coming right up, the Pell Center at Salve Regina and the Naval War College are combining on the Newport Forum, which we hope to be an annual joint forum that the Pell Center and the War College support each year to discuss primarily maritime security issues, us being the ocean state. We have Secretary Del Toro of the Secretary of the Navy coming up, and we have Secretary Kerry, the former Secretary of State and the Special Envoy for Climate, speaking as well. And Senator Reid and I will be there, and others. So I hope it is a helpful and useful event to keep the focus on the risks that I'm about to describe. I guess the way I'd describe it from a sailor's perspective is that by all measures, the equivalent of the barometer is falling very rapidly. And we do not know exactly what the storm ahead that the falling barometer signals will look like, but I think we can bet that it's going to be very, very serious. I may even underestimate how bad things are going to get. And a lot of it has to do with really basic principles of physics. We are warming the oceans by really unprecedented levels. The measure that I use is called the zettajoule. The joule being the unit of heat energy, and zetta meaning that it has like 23 zeros behind it. It is a truly massive number. And to put it into a human context of scale, if you look at the entire energy creation of the human species everywhere around the planet, all the stoves, all the factories, all the automobiles, all the aircraft, everything, the whole human energy production on planet Earth is 1/2 of a zettajoule. And for the price of the fossil fuel component of that 1/2 zettajoule of energy, we are adding at minimum 12 zettajoules of heat every single year to the ocean. So it's nearly a 30-to-1 bad ratio of what we get compared to what we load the oceans up with. So that obviously is going to change storm conditions on the ocean, and it's going to change storm conditions where the ocean meets the land as well. And sea levels are rising as a result. Warming seas rise, simple as that, which is going to affect operations, and it's also going to affect facilities. Trying to figure out what to do about Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean is a live problem for the Navy. A previous commander of Naval Station Norfolk said that he thought that base had maybe another 20, 30 years before it was no longer functional, not because you can't lift the piers, but because you can't lift the roads and the stores and the schools and the houses and the shopping centers and all of the human support that the port itself needs. So there's going to be a lot of action at coastal facilities, and guess what? The Navy has a lot of coastal facilities. So both from an operations and a facilities point of view, there are going to be very dramatic changes that are coming. I like to think about fisheries and focus on fisheries. First, because it's a catalyst of conflict. If a country has a fishery that it is dependent on, and the fish move as the water warms to find the cooler water that they're habituated to elsewhere, and the fishery collapses, you've got a lot of hungry people, and hungry people get angry very fast, and if you have to follow the fish into another country's waters, now you've got conflict between the two countries, and it can get pretty ugly pretty fast. My biggest worry, if I had to pick one out, is Pakistan and India, not coastal, but those Himalayan glaciers feed the Indus River and others, flows right through Kashmir where they're already shooting at each other. They both have nuclear weapons, and people don't last very long without water. And if they have to fight over water because the glaciers are no longer there to fill those rivers the way they used to, then you're going to have some very serious conflict there. So the fisheries is sort of a microcosm of that. And one of the things that I've learned and that the Navy has come to recognize is that China, as a rival of ours, is deploying its fishing fleet in hyper-aggressive ways. It is using it for ulterior purposes as well, and it is breaking all the rules of proper fishing behavior. And we more or less have let that happen. We've begun to learn, as the four-star leading AFRICOM told us at the Munich Security Conference not long ago, that the African coastal countries are eager to have U.S. support to protect their economic zones and their fisheries because they can't do it. They don't know who's out there. They don't have the resources to figure it out. Even if they could send somebody out to identify the boat, but they don't have the resources to enforce. And we need to help develop a global protection system that keeps the Chinese fishing fleet within proper rules, because it is highly predatory and highly aggressive. And that has national security implications. When I first raised this with the Navy, they basically told me to go pound sand. That's the Coast Guard's job. But they've come around to realizing that this is really important, and they've had a good working group that has come out with an initial partly classified report. And so progress is being made in the fisheries area. Of course, climate change also acidifies the oceans. And several years ago, there was a study of the pteropods, the little oceanic snails that operate, they're a little pelagic baseline species that everything else eats. And they sampled them off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, and more than half of the pteropods had what the scientists characterized as severe shell damage, because in an acidified ocean, shells don't last very long. And if that leg of the food chain were to collapse, you would have very, very significant security consequences that followed because of the food shortages that would follow from all of that. So fisheries, I think, is an insufficiently understood vector for harm and important for our national security. So keep an eye on that. And this also comes right at our economy. We think of climate change as, okay, that's got to be the polar bears, or that's all about the wind farms and new jobs and all that kind of stuff. Actually, it's about risk. And when risk gets out of control and insurance companies can't figure it out any longer, they can't do business. So well before the sea level rise comes to your house and your doorstep, the insurance industry will have left, because they will not have been able to predict out 30 years, particularly, to support a mortgage on a property. So what we're seeing in Florida is the leading edge of that right now. We are seeing a collapsing insurance market. We are seeing companies going bust because they can't pay claims. We are seeing companies abandon Florida because they can't quantify their risk. We are seeing very unstable state-backed insurance entities standing up to try to protect the market, but really all it's doing is cabining the danger when big storms come. And I think Florida is a preview of coming attractions for Rhode Island. We're coastal too, it's just worse in Florida. And if you can't get an insurance policy on your home, then you can't get a mortgage on your home. And if you can't get a mortgage on your home, it's really hard to find a buyer when you want to sell your home. And that leads to a crash in property insurance markets. And this isn't me making it up. This is the chief economist of the huge mortgage company Freddie Mac, warning that if this keeps up, it's going to be like or worse than the 2008 mortgage meltdown. And it's going to be that economic cascade from you can't get insurance to you can't get a mortgage to property value crash, and it becomes what bankers and economists call systemic. Everybody gets hurt, just the way everybody got hurt in 2008, not just the people with the bad mortgages. There's one other thing on the horizon that I want to mention because I think it'll affect the business of the Department of Defense, and that is the prospect of putting a price on carbon pollution to discourage it and to try to find a pathway to climate safety. And there are two ways in which that is moving forward. One is the so-called CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which the EU has adopted and which UK has joined, and which is going to require U.S. companies exporting to the EU and UK to pay tariffs unless we have a similar adequate bill of our own that they will give credit for. So I have those bills in Congress, and I'm watching this very, very carefully, but we are either going to be tariffed or we're going to have to build in a domestic carbon price and our own carbon tariff, which is going to affect the business environment, particularly the internal domestic carbon price. At the same time, the Department of Defense is obliged to pursue a social cost of carbon in its procurement. The social cost of carbon has already been set by regulation. It was in the EPA methane reg. It's a serious cost per ton, $190, so it's for real. And OMB has stepped in and said, everybody has to play. And we want all of the agencies to engage, and that includes in procurement. So that hasn't really happened yet. We're through the first two stages of the reg and the OMB circular, but the agencies are still working out their implementation of that directive. But it will come, and DOD, with its enormous expenditure, is going to be a prime focus of trying to get that right. But you can expect, in a matter of just a few years, to have your business model affected by either a domestic carbon price or a tariff related to the CBAM, and or the social cost of carbon, the price that will be baked into decisions about procurement by DOD and all other agencies. I mean, HUD, it's going to be everywhere. But it's pretty essential, it's coming, and I wanted to make sure you were aware of it. I'll close by saying that we really don't know what is going to come, but we do know that big, big changes are ahead, and very dangerous potential changes. It's long past just being polar bears. We're now looking at a Florida property insurance collapse. We're looking at very significant changes to coastal infrastructure, including our defense infrastructure. We're looking at significant impediment to various operating and training scenarios, and getting on top of that is going to be vital to all of us who care about the security of our country and to be able to succeed through those new headwinds. So thank you for giving me this chance to speak with you. We are always open and eager to help. Thank you to those of you who are here working in Rhode Island and employing Rhode Islanders and doing cool stuff in Rhode Island. We're very proud of you, and SENEDIA is a terrific organization that has the entire delegation's full attention. So have a great rest of the morning. Thank you for having me.